about the importance of naming the problem. That, and as Tony said, for men to take ownership of this issue, because men are mainly the perpetrators of violence against women. And so we spoke before that domestic violence is rooted in sexism and male domination, and that we need to stop asking women why they just don't leave. These are all things that we've already discussed. Tony pointed out to us that this today is the first generation of men being held accountable for domestic violence, and that there are good men, well-meaning men who have more in common than difference with men who batter and abuse, and that there's a silent partnership between men who batter and men who don't. And Tony did a great job of explaining that to us. And that chemical dependency and alcoholism are not causation for domestic violence. And again, we encourage you to watch your local access station to see more detailed discussion at all of these that we have just mentioned, because they were discussed in part 1. We also, Katura Bryant was here, and she also spoke to us about the dangers of couples counseling and family therapy, about how that must be handled very sensitively, and that there are a high percentage of men who assault women during pregnancy. So we have already addressed those, just so you know, and we're now going to start with, we're going to continue to name the problem. And you said that women are 4 times more likely to be abused at home than in the community. Now, most of us are afraid of violence in the community. We're afraid of the parking lot that is not well lit and getting to our cars safely, or the garage, you know, in some places, or just being mugged in the street. The average person who is not involved in domestic violence don't think about the fact that a woman is in danger more in her home than she is in the community. So who wants to address that piece for us? Help us to understand that.
Well, I know that here in Connecticut, for example, on an annual basis, we have some 20,000 cases that reach the courts, but there are countless other cases that go undetected, unreported, because typically the women are fearful, and also, maybe Sandy can discuss this at some greater length, there are complicated relationships. People may love the perpetrator in this case, or the perpetrator is the father of their children, or the primary source of financial support in the family. So even if one is threatened, it can be really tricky to get out of such a situation and to report the danger that exists. But again, Sandy could. And
does that account for the fact that women are 4 times more likely to get abused at home because they sometimes, so often, they're silent about it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think another factor is that for many women, when they leave the situation, or when they threaten to leave the situation, is when the violence escalates.
Oh, so how do we end this? How do we deal with it so that, you know, that seems like a vicious cycle. If they leave, they're likely to get battered more or get killed.
That's right.
And if they stay, they, you know, they continue to be battered. What do we do about it?
Well, that's some of the efforts that we're trying to address around a call to men, is moving domestic violence away from being a private crime to a public crime. And right now we deal with, we struggle with even dealing with it as a crime in some respects, but it's still viewed as a private issue, that is 2 people's business or family's business. We all could finish the statement, what goes on in this house stays in this house.
Yes,
you know, and it supports those notions that it's private, and we need to move it away from being private to move it to being a public issue. We don't have enough of a public outcry, a public outrage about this violence as we should. We have our high-profile cases, but they're minimal in respect to what's really going on.
Sandy, what can be done? You head up a large agency, and you see this every day. What can be done so that there's a greater level of awareness among the general public and a greater level of willingness to become involved, so that it's not, so it goes into the public domain. You know, if a man goes out the street and kills somebody he doesn't know, the police hunts him down, but he kills or beats up his wife at home several times before he kills her, and not much is done. How can we as a society help places like domestic violence services to change that?
Well, I think it really needs to begin very, very young. I think prevention is the best way of dealing with domestic violence. I think we need to spend more time, say, in the schools, educating our young people, not only educating them using teachers and curricula around that, but I think we need to be role models ourselves around nonviolent conflict resolution, using discussion, you know, to work out problems, to not rely on fists or verbal abuse to make your point or to try to gain power and control over the other individual. I think, unfortunately, in this culture, the message that young people and people of all ages are getting is, you know, might makes right. And you're just seeing that translated out in interpersonal relationships all the time.
Now, is your agency, Wally, is your agency, Tony, is yours, or any of you working with the school system to include this in, you know, going into doing presentations or anything?
We are very involved with the school system, and we are very involved with other agencies in the community, although we have a domestic violence program and an anger management program that is designed specifically for the perpetrators. We receive a lot of referrals through the court and through DCF. However, in our daycare, when we do orientation to the parents, we try to convey the message about domestic violence and other problems affecting the family and the society in general. But more specifically, sometimes some of the children come to the teacher and talk about something that happened at home. Or a client come to one of the counseling session with the black and blue or some problems, and then we discover that there is something going on in the house that is probably the secondary cause of the depression, because sometimes these individuals come because of other symptoms or because of other problems, but we know that behind those symptoms sometimes there is a serious problem of domestic violence. And we try to address that through education and making the domestic violence issue as part of any of the education that we do to the community as a service.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the good things that happened after we did part one of the program, Sandy, is that I got a call from a minister in Bridgeport who had not seen the program but had heard about the program from someone in New Haven. And he called to say to me that he wanted to come to speak about domestic violence because he thinks the church needs to play a greater leadership role. He said he's tired of seeing is the same parishioners coming in who has fallen down the steps, you know, a few times too many. It's the same explanation. She fell down the steps because she is black and blue. And so I think it is really, really important for all of us. So those people watching tonight, whether it's in your church or in your school, that this really be something that we talk about and to make it a public issue. Because as long as it remains private, women are in danger, children are in danger, and we'll never be able to put an end to the problem. Before we go on, I'm going to ask for us to put up the contact information for each of my guests, and you can start at any place. The contact information for Greater New Haven, Domestic Violence Services, A Call to Men, and certainly the Hispanic Institute for Hispanic Family, and Impact. And as soon as you're ready, you can put those up for me. Okay, A Call to Men is the organization that Tony Porter represents, and there on the screen is the contact information, the website, email, and phone numbers. The next thing, Tony, in the information you provide us, he said men's violence against women is a leading cause of injury to women. Now, we know that our judicial system is not uniform in how it metes out justice. You have some men who have killed their wives and they get out of prison after a few years. You have some who batter their wives and they do hard times. It depends on, you know, where it happens and all that. How can